Welcome to today's episode of TheSquare. I am Halima McWilliams, Associate Principal here at Corgan. Today, our guest is EVP and CEO Cheryl Durst with IIDA. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, Halima. I'm super excited to be here.
We are so glad to have you. This is your first time, but not your last time.
I love that how you said that. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, I just wanted to, kind of set the stage. You have been the CEO and EVP for IIDA for quite some time.
For 26 years.
26 years. Okay.
Long time.
Long time. However, not an interior designer, right?
I am not.
Okay. But school teacher in your past journey.
I was a ninth grade teacher.
Okay.
I had a ninth grade homeroom. I taught English. I taught history. I taught what once upon a time was called civics.
I remember civics.
Yeah.
Yes.
And teaching has so informed my approach to leading a not-for-profit membership organization, right? We are always in both teaching mode and learning mode. And I think that's what good teachers do best is they realize they're instructional, but you are, as a teacher, you're a lifelong learner. Yeah. And I have come to know and understand and appreciate that about design. Okay. Designers are lifelong learners, but they're also lifelong educators, right? Constantly educating their peers and colleagues, as well as clients, customers, end users, about the value of design.
That's what I was going to ask, the similarities, but also the differences in regards to kind of those journeys where or those chapters of you being a teacher and now leading an international organization. Where have you seen more so the differences in those two spaces?
I think the difference is, we tend to right, teachers are authority figures.
Sure,
they're kind of in a little bit. They're a little bit on a pedestal in some ways. Although they're not always appreciated.
Pay-wise, not so much.
For that pedestal, right? And I'll pivot a little bit to the similarities piece, because often designers aren't fully appreciated for not only what they do, but how they think. Like, that's the true value of design. Okay. I think on the client side, what a lot of people see is the output or the outcomes of design.
Sure.
But the first thing a designer does is think.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. The thinking precedes the actual verb of design. Yeah. And same rule applies for teachers.
Yeah.
We know that teachers are thoughtful. Teaching is an active verb, and before you get up in front of that classroom, there's so much thoughtfulness
and preparation, and
intentionality, and heart and soul and spirit that goes into teaching, and that's absolutely analogous in the world of design. I think we all have that one teacher that we remember, right? That kind of looms large in our hearts and souls. I often wonder for clients, is there that one designer or that one architect that looms large for them, that has that same gravitas, that same resonance,
impact,
that memorable teacher has? Is there that memorable designer that changed how you think about place, that changes how you think about brand, or changes how you think about your organization? I suspect the answer to that question is yes.
I'm sure.
And I'd love to find out, right? Wouldn't that be a great list? Is who's the designer that changed your life?
Absolutely.
Ask that of clients.
And the word design is so broad, and a lot of times people get caught up in design and think, you'll hear folks say, I'm not creative, or I don't know how to design something. But I usually tell people opposite, in that you probably designed the last trip that you took. You even designed your trip to the grocery store. Am I going when it's the peak of, the morning? Am I going after work? I need to put together a grocery list. All of those things, as simplified as that example is, many times we're designing everyday task.
Yeah. The word, it's so interesting how you said that. The word weighs a lot. The word design weighs a lot. It has a lot of emotional weight. And I think it has a little bit of, what I think so many people are attracted to is there's this glamour. There
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
there's a woo
The
to
bells
it.
and
The
whistles of it all.
bells and the
Yep.
and that's
Yeah.
what people are attracted
Sure.
to,
Sure.
right? And for a lot of people, design is actually invisible. It
Mhm.
sounds amazing and it's
Mhm.
wonderful, but
Mhm.
it's invisible. Design is
Mhm.
invisible until it
Mhm.
fails,
Mhm.
until something is not working right, or it doesn't feel right, or you're too hot, or you're too
Yeah.
cold, or
Yeah.
that you realize your back hurts from that chair that you've been sitting
Yeah.
in. And so there's this allure, there's this fascination
Yeah.
that the public has with design. And so many people think of design from an enthusiastic standpoint, right? And
Mm.
so there are people who are design enthusiasts. And
Mhm.
what a lot of people don't think about is design as a career,
Sure.
as a calling, as
Yeah.
a vocation,
Yeah.
as a right. And you talk to so many designers, and this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
I don't imagine myself doing anything else. And I know that that woo around design is sometimes detrimental to the profession because people don't see the worth and the value and
Sure.
the real work that designers do. And that goes back to that designers being kind of lifelong educators.
Sure.
And I don't mean, preaching from the mountaintops
Yeah.
about it, but helping people who are your clients and your customers
Yeah.
and your parents,
Yeah.
um, what the value of design really is.
Okay. So speaking of parents, I know your parents have a very strong academic
Yes. Yeah.
background, and their only child said, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about two things about your childhood. And one of them I found very interesting, of course, as I've met you since 2023, and it's been great getting to know you. But of course, in preparation for this conversation, one of the things I learned about you, and I connected to it immediately, was this invisible friend or friends. I too had one. Her name was Connie.
Aw.
Connie taught me how to tie my shoes.
Okay. All right.
However, you being an only child,
Mm,
different in a way from your parents, but you found ways to create community
uh-huh.
with these invisible people.
I
Tell me
did.
more about this.
So I had more than one
Yes. And then
imaginary
tell me why
friend.
that too.
Well, and I think it emanated from the fact that I was an only child.
Sure.
I grew up in a neighborhood where most of the kids in my neighborhood came from large families.
Okay.
I went to a Catholic school,
Okay.
and so a lot of the kids that I knew came from families of 5, 6, 7, 8. I could not imagine having that many people, with the same last name, sitting at the dinner table, and here I was, this very shy,
Mm.
lonely, only child.
Sure.
And don't get me wrong, I loved my upbringing. I loved my childhood.
Yeah.
My parents were extraordinary. They probably talked to me not like a child. So I had a very robust vocabulary
Okay.
early on.
Okay.
Books were my friends.
Yes.
But instead of one imaginary friend, maybe I had 6.
Okay.
And so my imagination was populated with these really interesting characters. And of course, being an only child, I always envied my friends who had brothers or sisters
Yeah.
because when something, broke in the house or something didn't happen, you could always blame a brother or a sister.
Sure,
and
sure.
I didn't have a dog even. And I had no one to blame it on. And so for a while, I tried blaming it on some
One
of
of
my
them.
imaginary
Yeah.
friends. My parents were way smarter than that. And so that didn't work out so well for me.
Okay.
But I think from having that community of
Yeah.
imaginary friends, they all had different personas and they were different types.
Yeah.
And it was a fertile imagination, and my parents did not discourage it.
Okay.
And that's what I grew to as I became older, and then having children of my own.
Mm-hmm.
They allowed me the freedom of an imagination.
Nice.
And that's such a powerful tool
Sure.
to encourage, and particularly my parents were, you and I have talked about this, and I think we share some similarities in our background. My parents were strivers. They
Mhm.
were middle class Black folks
Mhm.
who were proud of their HBCU educations
Mhm.
and proud to live and work hard
Sure.
They were also very strict and
Sure.
very conservative, and there were very straight lines in my household.
Yeah.
And so, as I got older and came to them with career aspirations,
Yeah.
early on, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to, when I learned, my parents put me in art classes in a local art museum,
Okay.
and I fell in love with this museum. And I started asking questions about not only artists,
Mhm.
but why do museums look like this?
Hmm.
Who's designing this
Mhm.
space? How do you know how to navigate from one gallery to the next? It was
Mhm.
my first introduction to wayfinding and what
Sure.
that meant. And then who puts together these collections? And I learned about curating art.
Mhm.
And so when I talked to my parents about working in a museum, because I absolutely fell in love with it, and I know many people who have a design background have heard this reaction. My mother said to me, "Oh, no, 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 we don't do that." And she didn't say it in a snobby, elitist way.
Yeah.
She meant that my parents just didn't know any curators. They didn't know any
Sure.
black
Sure.
curators.
Sure.
They were super conscious of the fact that as an only child, I was solo. I had a lot of internal thought, interior thought. I spent a lot of time by myself, and they
Yeah.
were very conscious of the fact that in thinking ahead for me about whatever my career would be, they did not want me to be lonely in life or
Yeah.
lonely in my career. Now,
Sure.
they had lived through situations where they were the only or the first, right?
Sure.
We all
Sure.
kind of know that being the
Sure.
first one or the only one.
Yep.
We know only lonely syndrome.
Mhm.
And my parents didn't want that for me.
Yeah.
But we've all had it. We've
Yep.
all lived through it.
Yep.
I've lived through it,
Yep.
managed to survive it.
Yep.
But I always respected, that very loving part of them,
Sure.
to support and nurture me, but also to keep me safe.
Okay. Okay. So you talk about first, and to your point, there is a celebration,
Hmm.
a responsibility, and a weight that comes from being the first.
Hmm.
I'll say it as a big sister of four girls. There is a responsibility that I wasn't always good with, but there is an admiration in that being the first. That you have to grapple with sometimes or navigate a place that no one has ever been. You're charting a path, you're blazing
Yeah.
a trail. Being the first African American woman to be inducted into the industry's Hall of Fame,
Mhm.
what does that represent for you?
It means that that's an incredible responsibility to be the first, and I always want to ensure that I'm not the last.
Absolutely.
And so, those of us who are the first at anything,
Sure.
I always feel that it is our ethical obligation to do what we need to do
Mhm.
to ensure that we're not the last.
Sure.
You never should be protectionist about being the first. Right,
Yeah.
you're there.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do to make sure somebody is right next to me
Sure.
and I'm supporting and helping?
Yeah.
I was very conscious for a very long while. I was the first African American woman to lead a design association, and it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
I When it was announced that I was going to be the CEO
Mhm.
of IIDA, the organization received death threats.
Wow.
There were members who resigned because they couldn't imagine a black woman,
Sure.
let alone one who wasn't
Not
a
a
designer,
designer. Right.
leading their organization.
Right.
My life was threatened.
Wow.
I had to have FBI protection when I stood up at IIDA's first annual meeting. That was
Wow.
not that long ago. That was in 1998.
Wow.
And yet and still, right?
Here you are.
Carry on.
Yeah.
And my colleague Lakeisha Ann Woods is the CEO of AIA.
Yeah.
And, subsequently there have been other people of color
Sure.
leading design organizations. Now, I'm not saying I'm the one who caused that to happen,
Sure.
but I am certainly glad to see that our
You're in
industry
shared company.
is
Yeah.
embracing talent,
Yeah.
diverse talent to lead these organizations.
Yeah. Kimberly Dowdell is now.
Really is the president
Yeah.
of
AIA.
AIA.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they now have a black woman as CEO and a black woman who is the president of their board of directors. Yeah.
And then I think with AIA, the president-elect behind Kimberly is an Asian woman.
Correct.
Yeah, so-
Correct. And Ronnie Belizaire is
Okay.
the current president of IIDA, so
Okay.
the president of my board.
Nice.
Gabrielle Bullock
Yeah.
was the first African American president of our board of directors.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I
And
think
it matters. Those things, I hate to say it, but in this moment and in our world, those
Yeah.
things do matter.
Yeah, I think we've heard this statement before, representation
Hmm.
matters. And in thinking about future designers, future generations, and just the demographic of the world that's continuing to change, not only are people looking for similarity, the markets in which and the clients in which we serve are also looking for relatability
Right.
and authentic
Right.
relatability. It can't be pictures on a website. It can't be statements. It has to be action, but it also has to be a core part of the business
Right.
and the organization.
Right, and particularly for design, which has not always been known
Mm-hmm.
for its diversity.
Sure.
Um, and it's, I've always firmly believed that you can't design for the world if you're not of the world.
Sure.
And so the roster of clients, the portfolio of work that Corgan has
Mm-hmm.
is not just for one typology,
Mm-hmm.
not for one type of organization.
Mm-hmm.
You are diverse in your disciplines.
Yeah.
The organizations that are your clients are diverse in their populations.
Yeah.
There's no reason why a firm should not have diversity of its employees, but also
Absolutely.
diversity of thought is
Sure,
important too.
sure. Yeah, I think that there is such a. If you said something to me earlier, there's a the big D in design that
Hmm.
represents so many facets of design, but there's a big D in diversity as well. It's not just about race and gender identity. It's far and wide. There's many intersections, and you have to be able to understand how to work with
Yeah,
if you've never worked with it before.
yeah.
Just attracting people is one part of it, but retaining them
Retaining.
and inviting them and including people is just as important, or you're going to have this revolving door
Yeah,
constantly,
yeah,
constantly.
yeah.
So, want to switch gears a little bit and talk about design. You've been CEO for 26
Mhm.
years now, so you've seen iterations, you've seen trends, you've seen all of these things. But one of the components I want to really hear from you about is the value of design, and do you think there is still this need to qualify it?
Mm. Oh, that's a great question. I think that, I think what often I hear firms and designers struggling with, right? Because there's not a CFO out there on
Yeah.
the client side who isn't trying to assess the ROI.
Yeah.
And when you are looking at a project, particularly now when we're thinking about this moment where we are looking at immersive experiences
Mhm.
and being experience focused,
Sure.
how do you start to quantify that?
Mhm.
Why does a space effectively work better than another space?
Yeah.
Why are my retention rates X
Yeah.
if I do Y with design? So, what's the corollary? And I think we're still, as a profession and as an industry, kind of looking for that hard data and that hard research. And,
Okay.
how do we measure satisfaction?
Yeah.
How do we measure joy? How do we
Mm.
measure happiness?
Yeah.
You can't take an MRI for everybody,
Yeah.
right, on
Yeah.
on a team to
Yeah.
kind of measure how the brain is feeling about a space, or even how the heart is feeling about a space. But I think in so many instances, designers are put in this place where they do need to have, right, evidence-based design.
Sure.
Show me, tell me why this will work,
Yeah.
and numbers and data will do that
Mhm.
better sometimes than a testimonial.
Sure.
But certainly there are surveys, there
Mhm.
are ways that we can demonstrate the effectiveness of design, recruitment and retention, employee surveys,
Yeah.
even when employees are leaving, exit interviews, because we are seeing that increasingly employees are talking about not just the emotional experience of work,
Okay.
but the place where work happens.
Sure.
And so we're in this moment, in this post pandemic moment, where there's starting to be some research around were people, in fact, more productive at home
Mhm.
Were they happier at home
Yeah.
because they were in their home environment? But now, as so many organizations are struggling with hybrid work,
Yeah.
should we be in 3 days, 4 days, 5 days? Right? That's still a lot of questions around a
Correct.
lot of
Correct.
organizations. How are we assessing how and where human beings are most effective, and how are we assessing performance? Does that happen at home in a home office? Does that
Yeah.
happen better in a formal workplace where we're surrounded by peers? The human body and the human brain reacts in real time in place.
Yeah.
And I know that there's research out there being done. I don't know that there's been quite that seminal study that tells us X, Y, or Z. There's also a little bit of trend
Yeah.
in there as well, but we know the pendulum is swinging, and more organizations are requiring, if not fully mandating,
Yeah.
longer stretches of time in the workplace.
I think too, you talk about place and workplaces and organizations in some form or fashion are living organisms. If it's
Absolutely.
a healthy work
Yep.
environment,
Yep.
and even if it's unhealthy, it's living. It's just maybe on its last leg.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, I'll say at Corgan, we have a very healthy workplace environment where people desire to be here, but we also are very declarative about who we are in that we are an in-office firm.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, too, going back to the statement around place also fosters community.
It sure does. Yeah.
So tell me about just what you've seen in your travels. And we
Mm-hmm.
were talking earlier, you've racked up a few miles
Yeah. Yeah.
here and there. You travel about 35 weeks out of the year as you're going around and talking to students and talking to practitioners and different people. What are you hearing as it relates to, I'll say, this newest generation or cohort, 24, class of 24, class of 25,
Mm-hmm.
their needs in regards to coming to place and community?
Okay. That was a lot. That was a
Yeah,
lot in that
sorry,
question.
sorry,
That's
sorry,
quite all right.
sorry.
You gave me a lot to work with there.
Yes.
So a couple things on that. As far as people coming back to work, I am a firm believer. You can have a fridge full of the best snacks
Sure.
and beer and wine down
LaCroix and
Wednesday and
Diet Coke.
all the things. Is that going to be a deciding
Sure.
factor to come back to work? I don't know. For
Yeah.
maybe a couple people,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But people come back to people.
Yeah.
And so this whole conversation about people coming back to work,
Yeah.
it's people coming back to people.
Yeah.
And particularly with younger generations in the workforce,
Yeah.
work is a social construct.
Mm-hmm.
Work is a social network.
Yeah.
And so there is that I'm coming back to my team, I'm coming back to my community.
Mm-hmm.
So an attraction feature rather than that fridge full of snacks.
Yeah.
Well, the more people you that you are having come back, the more people will come back. So
Sure.
coming back to those human beings are magnets for one another.
Yeah.
With the kind of newest generations in the workforce, there is a decided factor that they want to be in a place
Mm-hmm.
that feels welcoming to them, where there is a sense of, I don't know that this is a word yet, but I'm going to use it like it is a
We'll
word,
trademark it today.
belongingness.
Yes. Yes.
Feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling validated. And I don't mean like it's the set of friends.
Yeah.
Because they know that they're there to get work done.
Sure.
But there is a fulfillingness
Mm-hmm.
that happens. Again, that's one of those things. Can we measure that? Can
Sure.
we measure what fulfillingness feels like?
Yeah.
But it's that combination of factors of being around people,
Yeah.
working toward a common goal.
Yeah.
Companies and organizations that have a stated ethos,
Yeah.
a stated point of view. That ethos, it's like a campfire. People rally around it. A more formal HR word would be purpose.
Yeah.
What's your purpose
Yeah.
as a firm, as a company, as an organization? Because people will rally around purpose. It resonates for them. It brings meaning to what you do every day.
And I think at a very simple human level, we like predictability.
Mm-hmm.
So coming to the office, having a routine, all of those things, simplistically, for some people, that just matters.
Hmm.
I have my desk, I have my laptop, I have certain things that I can function in. It's a safe environment, it's clean, it's got snacks, but it's a predictable space. It's predictable with the people I work with. I know these folks. I get safety from them. I get fun from them. I get some of those intangible things that we can't measure,
Right.
but I low key, high key, I look forward to coming
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
you know?
And I think that's what's fascinating about the human brain and human nature. Inherently we look for signals.
Yes.
And so the space that we're in right
Yep.
now, this is giving signals about what's supposed to happen
Yes.
in this space.
Yep.
Any workplace will send you signals. And that's why a lot of people didn't necessarily do well working from home ever,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely that kind of forced period when for however long you worked from home. When we worked
Sure.
from home, those work happens here signals
Yeah.
weren't necessarily there. We had to create them, and
Yes.
that proliferation of all the things we needed for
Yeah.
our home office
Yep.
that clearly sent the signal that okay, work is going to happen.
This is how you behave here now.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, and some folks need those more overtly than others.
Absolutely.
But also, when we say workplace, I don't want that to necessarily mean a traditional workplace or a cubicle farm or all those things, because a workplace can be the United Club at DFW.
Yeah.
It can be the lobby of the Hilton,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And we are now starting to see more places
Mm-hmm.
that converge with other things, hospitality, retail.
Yeah.
But we're starting to see more places that are elastic enough in their
I love
brand
that.
and in their signaling
Yeah.
that can tell you work can happen here.
Here.
And one of the other places that work happens, and I find this so interesting, is in the car. And so, if you're in a city that, where you depend on your car to get you from point A to point
Yeah.
B, there's a commuter city.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who work in their car. If you're in sales,
Sure.
you'll pull over
Yeah.
and work, or sometimes your car can be parked in your garage and you just need to get out of your house,
Yeah.
take a call
Yeah.
in your car.
Yeah.
And so automobile manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of auto shows.
Okay.
But automobile manufacturers are starting to take that into consideration
Okay.
and think about how many people did Zoom calls, right, on the visual panel.
Mm-hmm.
And so starting to allow for some of the fact that work happens, whether it's in the driver's side or the passenger side. And I'm not a fan of distracted driving. Let's not
you.
advocate that. But
Yeah.
that thinking about the interior of a car as a place,
Yeah.
as opposed to, and again, one of my favorite things to think about is, space is physical and it's structured.
Yeah.
Place is
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
We connect to
Yes.
place.
Well, I mean, when you think about going to your place of worship, it
Mhm.
tells you how to act
Uh-huh.
or behave, but it's also emotionally connecting you to what's about to happen. But then when you speak about cars, I'm in the market for a car, a truck, I don't know what yet. But as I've just started to do some research, what I've seen is that infotainment center.
That's right.
A lot of the features are, it's a 14-inch screen, or it's more multi-purpose. And as my husband would say, I like the more bells and whistles of it. The exterior I could care less about, but I need to know that there are some upgraded and elevated features that allow me to integrate the different things that I'm doing. Like you said, not distracted driving, but am I able to do a Teams call as I drive safely? And there's some other components that make this seamless.
And you use the most perfect word. How well is your vehicle, your automobile, are you able to integrate your life
Yeah.
into that mobility machine?
Sure,
right?
sure. So I know that with IIDA, you all have a program, Design Your World.
Yes.
So similarly, and we were talking earlier, here at Corgan, we have a DEI initiative called Belong. We launched it in July of 2020. And as a part of that, we have what's called our Talent Pathways program, where we work with students from essentially third grade all the way through collegiate, exposing them, creating access, awareness, and opportunity to the world of architecture and design. You can't become what you've never seen.
Right.
Tell me, what was the catalyst for Design Your World, and what have been some impacts that have happened
So
since you all started it?
yeah, since working at IIDA, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with so many designers who talk to me about the fact that their parents didn't understand
Mhm.
what they wanted to do,
Yeah.
or their parents didn't support them. Both of my kids, they're young adults, I call them kids, but both of my kids are graduates of design, art and design programs. My
Nice.
son went to RISD. My daughter went to Santa Fe University of Art and Design. They're both filmmakers.
Okay.
And so when my husband and I were with both of them at like accepted students week or
Yeah.
freshman orientation, right?
Yeah.
Those rites of passage, I noticed so many kids who were by themselves.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, that's one of those things where your, parents are there and,
Yeah.
half of the time they're, paying for things and the other half of the time you're embarrassed because your parents are there. But one young man, and this is when my daughter was in Santa Fe, one young man walked up to me and he said, "Hey, would you mind if I stood with you all while we were like in the financial aid
Yeah,
line or
yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
and we're, getting information
Yeah.
about cafeteria or whatever
Sure.
it was." He was by himself. And I proceeded to listen to him, and he was talking about his parents wanted him to study pre-law.
Oh,
His
wow.
father was an attorney, his
Mhm.
grandfather was an attorney, and it was expected that he would go to UT Austin
Okay.
and be an attorney. And he did not want to study
Law.
law,
Okay.
and he really wanted to go to art school.
Okay.
And his parents were not supportive of that, so they said, "You're on your own.
Figure it out.
Figure it out."
Wow.
And he emancipated himself
Whoa.
so that he could qualify for financial aid. And I heard that story time and time again. And I heard it from many designers whose parents were unsupportive
Yeah.
of design as a career.
I see.
You'll starve, you won't be happy, that's not a real job,
Yeah,
right? Kind of all the
yeah.
things that we hear.
So
And
you just want to draw all day. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that stayed with me.
Yeah.
And I thought, so if it's that common, what must it be like for students of color?
Sure.
What is that like for Black and brown kids?
Yeah.
Who have a harder road
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
all those reasons, but then also talking to parents who maybe not have had an exposure
Mhm.
to design, right? And
Sure.
it doesn't matter whether you're from the wealthiest community or the
Sure.
poorest community.
Sure.
If you're not exposed to design,
You wouldn't
you're
know.
not going to know about it
Yeah.
as a career. But certainly first gen, if you're the first in your family to go to college,
Yeah.
your family is going to encourage you. Design is the last thing they're going to encourage you to do. It's going to be, be a doctor, be a lawyer,
Sure.
be something that we understand
Yep.
what that is.
Yep.
And that just stayed with me for years. And we had some new employees, and we had a new director of sales. And I'm like, I've always wanted to do a program where we talk to Black and brown kids
Okay.
about design
Yeah.
and reveal for them
Mhm.
the career path that is possible.
Yep.
And there are a lot of successful Black and brown folks in the design industry.
Yeah.
And they're not always necessarily designers and architects.
Sure.
They're salespeople. They're working at dealerships. They're working
Yeah.
at product manufacturers. And so that's how that idea of Design Your World was born. And so our program is geared toward high school students.
Okay.
And, and often that's even late to start talking career. Like I would love to have a Design Your World version for second, third, fourth
Sure.
graders
Sure.
because kids are making career decisions earlier,
Early.
thinking about who they want to be and what they want
I
to
mean,
be.
these kids are learning to code and, they're 8.
Exactly.
What? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so our first program, actually, our first curriculum launched in Chicago, actually during the pandemic in 2020. So we did it online.
Yes.
But having those 25 kids and exposing them to what design could be for them. And that's
Mhm.
why it's deliberately and intentionally called Design Your World.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about design starts at home. And for
Sure.
most people, that is
Sure.
a great jumping off point. That first place that you're acquainted with is your home.
Yeah.
And our intent is that we are teaching about commercial interior
Mhm.
design, but the first experience that most of us have is from the residential side.
Mhm.
And so we talk to the kids about how everything is design, that toothbrush that you hold in your hand,
Yeah.
the fact that you might have a nightstand next to your bed. Well,
Yeah.
you thought about putting that there
Yeah.
for the sake of comfort or
Yeah.
convenience.
Convenience. Yeah.
But that the key factor is design, is somebody thought about that. And
Absolutely.
that's such a revelatory and illuminating moment when you kind of see kids make that connection,
Yeah.
that design isn't random. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen accidentally.
Sure.
It happens because someone thought about you.
Yeah.
Design is about what happens on the receiving end.
Sure.
And so exposing kids who may not have had the benefit of ever knowing a designer or even necessarily being in an art class, because also art classes are, are often the catalyst for a lot of folks in design. And
Yeah.
so kind of seeing that, kind of seeing that light in their eyes when they discover, oh, I can do this.
I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in the 4 years, we are now currently teaching in Chicago, St. Louis, and Miami.
Nice.
And in those 4 years, we now have 7 alums of our program in those cities who are now currently enrolled in design school.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
And it's as much as I'd like to think that every single child who is enrolled in Design Your World will become a designer, the reality is, even if we can open them up to a new way of thinking,
Absolutely.
to the rigor of design thinking.
Yeah.
The other thing about design is it gives you such agency. It gives you this sense of I have some control over my environment, over my world. If we arm them with that, then we will have done our job with that program.
And I think coming into this is my first time working in this AEC environment. And I had a very lay understanding of architecture before coming here. And so now that I'm here and work with architects and interior designers and see the impact and the projects that we produce, and then when we go to career fairs and we talk to the younger folks and they understand how architecture can change an entire community. They get it. I'm pursuing this because I want to go back home and take what I learn and change this community center in my area, or design one because we never had one. Or we don't even have a grocery store here that's not within 20 miles. So I want to be a person that really helps to blaze that trail for my community. So it's such a powerful, like you said, an understanding, once you're exposed to it, there's so many things that you can do. Which now takes me to my question. I get an opportunity and a privilege to mentor a lot of people, be it here at Corgan and outside of Corgan. And, I'm normally always asked about my career journey and the different hats that I wear here or in other places. And I usually always tell folks to follow the squiggly lines. The Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You Will Go. And I remember getting that book as an adult and had never read it prior to then. And it was a gift an organization had given everybody. And so I actually read it. And then, of course, later on in life, oh, this is real life stuff, Dr. Seuss. You might know what you're talking about. So tell me, Cheryl, for the future designer, the upcoming grad, and even the emerging professional, what's the squiggly line advice you would give them from school teacher to CEO? What does that look like for them in their journey?
Well, I think probably the first piece is there may not be a rule book. There may not be a guidebook for how to get to where you want to get to with a career in this industry. Because there's such depth and breadth to this industry, and you could start your life in a firm, and you could work 10 years in a firm and certainly get diversity of experience. That's one option. And so I always encourage people that if you do have the ability or you're at a firm that offers you multiple opportunities, don't jettison those opportunities, because life can certainly there's rich context in working in a firm. You can dive deep into a specific discipline, whether it's workplace or aviation or healthcare, and you can certainly immerse yourself in that. But you can also, from a material standpoint, there's so much within life within a firm that you can certainly have a rich career path or multiple paths within a firm. But then also, should you ever choose to leave that firm, your design degree is certainly portable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the whole world of product manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
There's the whole world of sustainability consulting.
Okay.
Designers are incredibly entrepreneurial, and I've
Okay.
certainly seen many designers live a rich and full life as consultants to
Mm.
clients.
Okay.
Um, so I so there's it's not linear, right?
Yeah.
Designers often don't go from A to B to
Mm-hmm.
C. They go
Mm-hmm.
from A to L to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
back to
Mm-hmm.
B, and I think that's the beautiful thing
Yeah.
about design. And I guess it's a great and terrible thing, because if you're a person who wants a prescribed career path,
Yeah.
that's not here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and if that's what you're looking for, then you're going to have to create that, because you'll be helping a lot of people who want that very linear
Sure.
path. But I think the beauty of a career in design is it can be iterative.
Yeah.
You can be agile, you can be flexible, you can be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
You can design your own career path, right? It is using both sides of your brain.
Yeah.
Which I find so invigorating and so exciting. It also keeps design, from a context standpoint, so fresh and so new.
Yeah.
And so many designers have told me that they have created positions for themselves.
Right.
You can become a real estate expert. You can
Hmm.
become client service. If new business development is your thing,
Yeah.
then
Go after it.
go after
Yeah.
that, and that can happen in a firm, that can
Sure.
happen in a dealership, that can
Sure.
happen with product manufacturers, that can happen on your own.
Okay.
And so I think that for anyone who is new or in the middle of their
Mhm,
career,
mhm, mhm.
or even considering what's next,
Mhm.
there's also teaching.
Yeah.
And so that area of curriculum development, professional development,
Yeah.
training
Yeah.
in a firm, there's a lot of opportunity there, but certainly the ability to be adjunct
Yeah.
and teaching in a design school or an architecture program.
Okay.
I think that's a particularly valuable opportunity,
Yeah.
for people who are kind of searching for their what's next. Yeah.
Yep. What's
Yeah.
next? So I want to do a little bit of rapid fire with you, and ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
Some whimsical, some
Okay.
about design. Favorite day of the week?
Ooh, Wednesday.
Why?
Because it's sitting right there in the middle. Because it's not Monday or Tuesday, and it's not Thursday or
Yeah,
Friday. I
yeah.
think, and it's funny. Which I hadn't thought about this, but I was born on Wednesday. That's not why I
Okay.
picked it as my favorite day of the week. But it's like it. You know how it feels like a Friday. It feels like a Monday.
You just
Does Wednesday have a feel? I don't know.
maybe Wednesday we could call it the cusp.
Yeah,
it's the
It's
cusp.
just sitting
Yeah.
right there in the middle. It's a little bit new. Like, how do you hate Wednesday?
You really don't.
Right?
You really don't, because like you said, you're halfway around the marathon lap of the
Yeah.
week, but you also know I'm not going back, but I'm not all the way there yet. But
Yeah.
I can get there.
Yeah, and
get there.
visually, like, I
Yeah.
love the way the word looks. So, yeah, I could go down a whole path on just
About
Wednesday.
just Wednesday. All right. So tell me about these signature glasses. Where did this story come from?
So I think of glasses as an accessory, and
They are.
I love my bracelets. I
Yes.
love rings. I love
Yes.
earrings.
Yes.
And so I've never had the world's best eyesight. And glasses just kind of have always been this interesting thing to me. And
Yeah.
when I jumped on the first time I was on Instagram, I am not a fan of taking a selfie.
Okay.
And so glasses kind of became my avatar. And so instead of me taking a selfie of myself in any
Yeah.
situation, I let my glasses stand in for me. So I just started doing my photos will just have my glasses wherever I need them to be. So they're a stand-in for me. But they're fun, though.
They're your they're visible seventh
They're my-
invisible friend.
Yes, they are. They are.
I too believe in glasses. I have 20/20 vision, but I love glasses because I just think that it can change, like you said, your avatar or your persona.
Yeah.
If you have on certain glasses, you feel like a school teacher that
Right.
day, or you feel like you're a 1990s hip hop star. Just the
Absolutely.
style of
They are-
glasses
They're a
adjust
vibe.
your mood.
Glasses
Right.
are a vibe.
They definitely are a vibe.
Yeah.
Okay. Beyonce is. Complete that sentence.
All the things. She's a Texan.
She is a Texan.
She's at the top of the Billboard chart. She
Yeah.
is at the top of the country music chart. She's a wife. She's a mom. She is an entrepreneur. She is beyond fabulous. I also find her persona really fascinating.
Okay.
And you know, we're in this interesting moment of, you know, kind of Taylor Swift as a culture hero
Yeah, yeah.
moment. Beyonce also
Yep.
culture hero moment.
Absolutely.
And but there's probably team Beyonce, team Taylor too, but these, you know, two powerful women
Yeah.
who have caused lots of conversation in the world
And
of culture
generated
and
billions
politics
of
and
dollars.
generated billions of dollars in the meantime.
Yeah.
But also I find that, right, you don't have to be a certain age to rally around to be in part of the beehive or
Sure.
to be a
Swiftie. Yeah.
They both have been unifying factors. I've heard a lot of parents of young girls saying that they've been able to have different kinds of conversations with their daughters because of either Beyonce or Taylor Swift.
Wow.
But particularly with Beyonce, I just find her super fascinating.
Yeah.
Kind of would love to, you know, I don't know if we have to commit to a whole dinner, but I'd have lunch with her.
Yeah.
Just to,
Yeah.
you know, maybe you can get her on
Say,
the Square.
I might be able to do it. We'll send it. We do have a Houston office, so I'll put them on the job for that.
There you go.
So, last question for you: the future of design is
Infinite.
okay.
It is, for me, I find design to be the world's most optimistic profession.
Okay.
You can't believe in design if you don't believe in human beings.
Oh Lord.
And, you know, design is altruistic. It is a service profession. You are creating for the betterment of, the advancement of,
Sure.
the safety of, the security of human beings. A single individual or an entire population,
Yeah.
design amplifies
Yeah.
the human condition for the better, and you can't do that if you don't believe that the human condition can be amplified. And so it is therefore optimistic, and when anything or anybody is optimistic, I find those possibilities infinite.
Very interesting, Cheryl. Thank you for spending time with us today. You've been with us all day for our employee event, and now we're sharing you with the world as if you're not already out there. But we are so appreciative of the time that you've spent with us, and we hope that you had a good time with us too.
I indeed did. I'm happy to be an honorary Corganite for the day.
You are a Corganite. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Square. We hope to see you again next time.